For today's thoughts before we eat the communion together, I need to lean heavily on your recall of what the Passover of Israel was all about. This was the feast that celebrated the people's deliverance from Egypt when God punished their enemies, released them from their bondage, and He gave them a sign that their salvation by Him would be sealed, where they would sacrifice the life of a lamb and put the blood of that lamb on the doorposts of their homes. And when that happened, the angel of death would pass over their homes, therefore the name, the Passover. And when God gave them all of that, when He told them about the Passover, He told them that they would keep it as a memorial feast throughout their generations as a statute forever, according to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 14. So I need you to kind of make sure that you have all of that uploaded and locked in so that we can turn our Bibles this morning to 2 Chronicles chapter 30, which if you're using a Bible from the pews is going to be page 354. And I want us to look at 2 Chronicles chapter 30 for what happened to the Passover as the history of the nation rolled on through time. By the time you get to 2 Chronicles 30, hundreds of years have passed in the history of Israel. And it's after they've been through so many ups and downs in their faithfulness to God. But when we get to this chapter, they're finally going to do well for a little while. They have a king named Hezekiah who is restoring the priesthood. He's leading people to worship God in a healthy and spiritual way that they should have been doing all along. And so even though up to this point, leading up to this point, they have been so far away from who they should be and so far away from God. Now, thanks to Hezekiah, they are digging through the Bible and they're learning all the rules that are new to them about how they're supposed to live as God's people. Now, those rules are very old rules, but they're new to them. Okay, and so that's the process that we're in. And so along with a whole bunch of different things that they are putting back into place, when we get to 2 Chronicles 30, this is what it says starting in verse 1. Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. For the king and his princes and all the assembly in Jerusalem had taken counsel to keep the Passover in the second month, for they could not keep it at that time because the priests had not consecrated themselves in sufficient number, nor had the people assembled in Jerusalem. But the plan they made seemed right to the king and all the assembly. So they decreed to make a proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, that the people should come and keep the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel, at Jerusalem, for they had not kept it as often as prescribed. Now just pause there for a little bit. What's happening here is that Hezekiah has invited all of the Israelites, even those who are part of the rival kingdom of Israelites, to come to Jerusalem and share the Passover together for the first time in a long time. Now, how do you think that invitation was received when they were invited from the rival kingdom to come down into Jerusalem and share this? Well, it's verse 10. The couriers went from city to city throughout the country of Ephraim and Manasseh as far as Zebulun, but they laughed them to scorn and mocked them. However, some men of Asher, of Manasseh, and of Zebulun humbled themselves and did come to Jerusalem. Well, maybe that could have gone a little better, but at least some people came. And I'm skipping a lot of the details in this for time's sake, but let's go down to verse 21 now for the summary of how all of this came together. The people of Israel who were present at Jerusalem kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days with great gladness. And the Levites and the priests praised the Lord day by day, singing with all their might to the Lord. And Hezekiah spoke encouragingly to all the Levites who showed good skill in the service of the Lord. So they ate the food of the festival for 7 days, sacrificing peace offerings and giving thanks to the Lord, the God of their fathers. Now, this is a good scene. You know, this is one of those times when everything just kind of comes together and there's a lot of joy among the people of God. The yearly Passover was a big moment for the Israelites when they were supposed to remember who they really were and who their God was. So this is a happy moment in their history, and yet, there is this twinge of bitterness in all the sweetness. Look at verse 26 now. So there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the time of Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem. It is significant to know, brothers and sisters, that the time frame represented in that sentence is over 200 years. That since the time of Solomon, from Solomon to Hezekiah, for over 200 years, there hadn't been a Passover like this in the city of Jerusalem. Small wonder that as a correlation to that, the land is full of idols and the people's hearts are far away from God. It's been over 200 years since they have had a Passover like this to God. Y'all, when we eat the Lord's Supper on Sundays, I hope that we can take a warning from what happened among the people, that we learn the value of the memorial meal that God has given to us. Because our memorial meal is a direct outflow of the Passover. Jesus was eating the Passover with the disciples when he gave us this supper that we will eat today. And I just want to make sure that we take a stern warning and encouragement from 2 Chronicles 30 that we never drift even an inch toward our own lost Passovers like what they had. And so what that means for us is that we need to realize the importance of doing this every Sunday. That every time we come together for this memorial meal, it matters a great deal. I get that after hundreds of years and so many generations, I get how the Israelites might think, this is just Passover. We do this every year. We'll catch it next year. It's not that important. We can skip it once. It won't be a big deal. It'd be real inconvenient this year. Let's just wait till next year. I get that because that's human nature. And I feel that same human nature in myself. But that doesn't make it right. And it's certainly not helpful if what we're trying to do is serve God faithfully with all of who we are. That even once we would skip or just even downplay the importance of enjoying the meal that God has given us as a memorial of who He is and who we are as His people. There was supposed to be a sense of occasion about the Passover. That everybody knew this was special. And it was special enough to interrupt everything else in life to be there for the Passover in Jerusalem. And y'all, there's supposed to be a sense of occasion about the Lord's Supper as well. That it's special enough that everything else in life can be interrupted so that we can be with the people of God and commune with God. It matters that much. The practice itself, the simple act of eating this meal on a weekly basis, the unity of the believers who share in it together, and the confession of sins that we want to be forgiven so we can come clean and worthy to His table. All of it points us to the wonderful, merciful Savior who died on the old rugged cross that we just sang about in those two hymns. All of it points us to the fact that this is special every time. I don't really know how the whole nation of God's people got to a point where they could just skip Passover for 200 years and nobody think twice about it. I'm sure thankful for Hezekiah, who came and read his Bible and said, this matters. We're a month behind, but let's do this thing because it matters. I've been on occasion in my life, I've spent Sundays with church families that didn't view Sundays, and especially didn't view the supper of the Lord with a sense of occasion and specialness. And I bet some of you probably have too. You've been in those settings. And it just pains the heart to see that. Because you get a sense that they could be like the Israelites. That if this wasn't an option, nobody would miss it. Because nobody has realized in a long time how special it really is. And y'all, we need to take a warning from that. We don't want to leave the door open for our own lost Passovers. And so may God help us if we come into his presence and we don't truly grasp how special it is to commune with the Lord every single time. The Israelites went hundreds of years without the Passover because they didn't understand its significance, and they didn't apparently miss it when it was gone. Let's make sure that we don't lose sight of how special this is. Because when they remembered it, there was great joy in Jerusalem. But it had been a long time since Solomon, the son of David, that there had been anything like this in Jerusalem. May it never be said of God's people that any time had passed when we had forgotten to honor Christ through his supper, to treat this like it is truly special. And may it be that there is great joy among the people of God every time that we eat this feast together.